welcome to the Idiot's Guide. I'm Mackie Hall. Last go around, we used Envelope Distort Make with Top Object to distort text in some really creative ways. Unfortunately, it does have its limitations. This go around, we're going to address those limitations, and we're going to step it up a notch by showing you how to use Envelope Distort Make with Mesh to bring text into complex shapes. Check out some of the examples right here of what we're going to be doing today. All right, I've talked too much. Let's get started. Did I mention I love this stuff? Let's create a new document. Our new document will have a width of 1,000 points, a height of 1,000 points, a single artboard, and the RGB color mode. Before we get started, I want to remind you that we are using the Essentials layout. In order to use or see the Essentials layout, click on the top right-hand corner of your screen and select Essentials. I also want to remind you that we are using Smart Guides. To select Smart Guides, simply go to View, Smart Guides, or select Control U. Another thing worth mentioning is that we'll be including notes and key command recommendations at the bottom of the page. The first thing we'll do is we'll select our rectangle tool, click and drag from the top left of our artboard down to the bottom right. Once done with that, we'll set our fill to black and our stroke to transparent. We'll deselect our rectangle by doing one of two things. We can either grab our selection tool and click anywhere on screen off the rectangle. We can do the same thing with our direct selection tool. Or of course, if our element is selected and we've got our rectangle tool selected, we can press on our control key, which brings up either our direct select or our general select tool, and click anywhere on screen off of our rectangle. Once done with that, let's open up our layers window. If you don't have yours open though, you can select Window, Layers, or press F7. With our layer selected, let's double click on our layer name and rename it Background. Once done, let's lock that layer and create a new layer. You can create a new layer by clicking the plus sign at the bottom of your layer window or by pressing Ctrl L. Let's rename this layer Image. The next thing we're going to do is take a trip to the web, and let's visit c-cinema.com/images/car_gto.jpg. Once we're there, you can see the lovely image of the car that we're going to use as the basis for our image. Going to right click on it, select Copy Image. Let's go back to Illustrator, and let's paste our image on our page. You can either paste it by selecting Edit, Paste, or by pressing Ctrl V. Once we're done with this, let's lock our layer, and let's again create a new layer. Let's rename our new layer Trace. As you can imagine by now, this is the layer that we're going to use our pen tool to trace our car shape. Let's get started with that. If you don't know how to trace an image, please check out my pen tool tutorial on the link you see on the page. Let's zoom in and let's get started. Note that the biggest thing we want out of our object trace is for our trace to be representative of the image that we are building. In short, it doesn't have to be perfect, it just has to give a clear understanding of the car we are building. Next thing we need to do once we get started with our trace is let's change our fill to transparent, and let's have our stroke be a contrasting color. In this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it bright green. That way I can see it around the image I'm trying to trace. Once we're done, let's minimize the page. Before I move on, I want to do one more thing. Since I know my artwork is going to be two-tiered, or since I know my type is going to be two-tiered, I'm going to use my window line as the line that I delineate my first row of type from my second one. Once I'm done, I'll deselect my pen tool by pressing the Control key, again bringing up my direct selection tool or my selection tool and clicking anywhere on screen off my shape. Once done with that, I'm going to lock my trace layer. And let's build our tire layer. Again, we'll select to add a new layer. We'll rename the layer Tires. Let's zoom in on one of the tires. And let's get started. When we build our tires, we're going to use a combination of our rectangle tool, our ellipse tool, and our pathfinder tool. The first thing we'll do is we'll start with our ellipse tool. We'll select our ellipse tool and get started. Once we've built our first ellipse, we'll copy and paste our circle in front, and then we'll use our scale tool from there. What I've done using the pathfinder tool is create a singular shape. Once we're done with the tires, let's lock our layer. Let's create a new layer. Let's double click on the layer name and let's rename it Type. This is where the fun starts with Envelope Distort. First thing we'll do is we'll select our Type tool. We'll click anywhere on screen. We're going to change our fill to white and our stroke to transparent. Next thing we'll do is we will write the following. We love good old American muscle. Next thing we'll do is we'll select all of our type. In our character window, let's select Velcro. If you don't have Velcro, it's available for free download at pixelsurplus.com. All you need to do is visit the site, do a search for Velcro, and download. Once done with that, let's increase our type size to 50. You can either do it on the top bar or by opening your character window. Speaking of the character window, you can see mine open on the right side of the screen. If you don't have it open, select Window, Type, Character, or enter Control-T. Once you've got that open on the right menu of your character window, click on that and select All Caps. Let's deselect again by pressing the Control key and clicking anywhere on screen. This is the type we're going to be using. So right now we've got all the information on the page that we need. One thing that we don't need right now is our original artwork. So let's go to our layers panel, go down to our imaged layer and make that invisible. We do that by clicking on the eye. Once done with that, let's select our type layer once again. And with our selection tool, let's click on our type. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to change our type object from a type object to a shape layer. We do that by right-clicking on our piece and selecting Create Outlines. Again, our type is now turned into a specific shape. Let's take one more step to create our letter shapes into individual shapes as well. Once again, we're going to right-click and we'll select Ungroup. Once done with that, you can notice that I click on any individual letter shapes and they are operating independently from one another. Once done with that, let's create individual letter groups. The way we do that is we are going to click and drag across specific words, and we are going to make each word into a group. With the exception of our top column, because the letters are so short, we're going to make that one singular shape. The way we do that, once again, we'll drag across We Love, then select Object, Group. You can also select Control-G to group any selected elements. Next thing we'll do is we'll do the same thing with Good, Old, American, and Muscle. Now that we're done with that, let's move our type into place. We'll start with our second column, just to move it into the general area right there. Next thing we'll do is we'll select We Love and move it into our first column. We'll start by left justifying. I think that's a good place right there. And let's zoom in. Next thing we want to do is we want to scale our type to fit the shape. By the way, when we zoom in and zoom out, all we're doing is pressing the control button and pressing either plus to zoom in or minus to zoom out. Now, we can adjust the size of our selected shape two ways. One way, of course, is by double-clicking on our scale tool and then sizing our piece up however we see fit. Let's cancel that. I'll show you a more manual way to do it. With our shape selected, let's grab our selection tool, and you'll notice a rectangle appears around our shape. Now we can click on any of these edges to change the scale or proportion of our shape. In this case, what we're going to do is we are going to grab the bottom corner and we're going to start dragging out. But while we drag out, we're going to hold our Shift key. That's going to maintain the exact proportion of our shape. Drag it out to about like that. And let's arrow it up to see how it fits in our shape. Let's arrow it just a little bit more. Again, we're going to grab the bottom right corner, hold our Shift key, and drag out to about like that. I think that's a pretty good size right there. We'll deselect, and you can see we're pretty close to how we want our letter shape to look. Let's zoom in one more time. Let's select our shape, and let's get started with Envelope Distort. On our top bar, we'll select Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Mesh. Once we've selected that, let's select the Preview button, and let's change our mesh rows to 2 rows, and then we adjust the column number to match how many characters we've got in our shape. In this case, we've got 6 letters, so we'll do 6 columns. Select 6, and let's go OK. Now that we're done with that, let's start playing with our shape. We're going to grab our direct selection tool, and we're going to start from the top left and work our way over. And what we're going to do is we're going to click on our end anchor point, and just using our directional keys, we're going to arrow down until it matches the shape constraints. Now, this is why we trace our shape, because then we've got instantly embedded constraints. So what we're doing is we're dragging our shape anchor points to the top edge of our shape for the top, and then we're going to use our window line for the bottom. Note that we're not being exact here. All we're doing is matching anchor points. Also note that we're only manipulating our type in a single direction. That way our type stays recognizable. If we start manipulating your type both horizontally and vertically, we're only manipulating ours vertically right now. You drastically affect the type to the point that it's not recognizable. Once we're done with the top and bottom mesh, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the middle mesh, and we're going to just bring that down to be centered beneath our top and bottom elements of our mesh. Once we're done with the middle and all of our mesh, we can deselect our piece. But our letter isn't quite right. If you look at the E, for example, you can see it's kind of arrowing in the wrong direction. The way we fix that is by adjusting our shape handles. Here's how we do that. Let's click on our mesh one more time, and let's select an end anchor point. We'll start with the right top. We'll click on that, and we'll click on this handle, and we'll drag it so that the line follows our shape line once again. We'll go all the way across our shape by doing this. We'll do the top, we'll do the bottom, and then we'll finish off with our middle. If it's close to horizontal, I'm not going to bother with it. Note that the typeface we're using is a hand-drawn typeface. That gives us a lot of room for error. If you use a perfect serif or sans serif, any imperfections that might pop up, they're going to be incredibly visible, and it's just going to take away from the quality of the shape. Let's manage our middle line now. Once we're done, let's deselect or click anywhere on our screen. Let's zoom out. We're looking pretty good. Let's start playing with our second row. Let's grab our selection tool and let's select good. Let's zoom in. The next step with our second row is taking our type and approximately positioning them in the areas that we want. You can either drag and drop or use your directional keys to move your elements. Notice I'm not worrying about size right now. I'm just worrying about position. Let's go back to good. Let's zoom in a little bit and let's scale it out once again. The way we do that is with our selection tool selected. We click and drag on the bottom right of our shape. Hold our shift key to maintain proportion and drag it out until we are feeling good about it. I think that looks pretty good right there. Arrow that up and move that out. I think that's a good place right there. Next thing we'll do is we'll select Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Mesh. And again, we'll keep 2 rows and we'll change our column number to 4 to match the number of characters that we're adjusting. Once done with that, let's start adjusting. We'll grab our direct selection tool and go for it. Note that our middle line stays the same, so we're really not needing to worry about adjusting that. So with that in mind, let's change our handles to match the line that we're trying to fit inside. Again, the mission here is to fit our type within the shape that we're building. And that looks pretty good right there. Let's deselect good. Let's move over to old. Please note to space your words out enough so that they can be delineated from one another. Since we've bottom aligned our type, let's grab our top right anchor point and drag from there, holding our shift key to maintain proportion. Once done with that, let's go Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Mesh. Next, let's adjust the middle of our mesh. Once we're done with our anchor points, let's grab the handles and start shaping out our type. We'll start from the bottom left and work our way around. Let's deselect and check out American. Now, because the word American is going to be moved vertically in line, what I will do in this case is I will scale it right from my selection tool. I do that by just grabbing the middle handle, just dragging straight up. Once done with that, we'll go Object, Envelope Distort, Make with Mesh, keep it at 2 rows, changing our columns to 8. Note that you can drag across multiple elements and drag them down at the same time as well. You can also select multiple elements by holding the Shift key and selecting them. To move elements in 10-point increments, just simply select them, hold your Shift key, and then arrow in the direction that you want to go. Always make sure that the distance between rows is relatively consistent. Next, let's adjust our middle mesh. Note that if your center mesh is approximately correct, there's no real need to bother with it. Once done, let's adjust our handles to get our type looking right. Overall, that looks good. Let's deselect, zoom out. Let's move over to muscle. Six columns for 6 words. And let's get started. Once we're done, let's adjust our handles. Note that in Muscle, we're going to be required to move a lot of handles to get our shape and our type looking just right. Once done adjusting our handles and anchor points, click anywhere on screen off of the object, and let's minimize our page. We're looking pretty good there. Note that now we don't need our trace layer, so let's go back to our layers window and make that layer invisible. Again, we do that by clicking on the eyeball representing the layer. There we go. We're pretty close now. Let's change the color of this piece to red. Notice if I grab my selection tool, click on any element, and try to change the color, look what happens. Notice that nothing happens. The reason we can't change the color is that we're still in the envelope distort mode. The way we fix that is we select all of our type elements. We can drag across all of our type elements just like that, or we can click individually, or we can select multiple amounts by clicking and holding our Shift key simultaneously. Once we've done that, let's go Object, Expand, and that will change our envelope distort shapes to simple shapes. Now that we've done that, we can change the color. Let's again change it to red. Let's deselect that and let's change the color of our wheels. Let's unlock our tire layer. We'll select both wheels. We'll double click on our fill. And there we go. Let's do one final step to make sure our object acts as a group. Let's select our tires. Let's copy them. Let's lock our tire layer. Let's select our type layer. Paste our tires in front. Let's deselect that. Let's hide our tires layer. Make sure it's locked still. With our type layer selected, let's drag across all of our elements. Note that all of our other layers are locked. Let's hit Control G or Object Group. Once done with that, let's deselect, and we are done. Now let's get back to the stop octagon and envelope distort make with top object. If you want to fix it, check out this video right here, and it's worth it because it offers some new tips and tricks that we haven't addressed in the past couple of videos. Here's a final word about distorting text into complex shapes. The first is either using a hand-drawn or a script typeface. Thick is better than thin. The next thing you want to do is in any shape or bit of artwork that you're doing, make sure it's got an immediate calling card. In this case, we used the wheels. Without them, as you can see right here, it doesn't look like anything. It certainly doesn't resemble a car. And with that in mind, you wind up losing viewers. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments section below. Beyond that, throw me a like. I'd really appreciate that. Beyond that, subscribe. We'll see you next time.